I'm a fraud. I'm a fraud. I'm a monster!
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Void Theater. As always, I'm your host Alexander, and we're back with another character study. And since we're just going down a list of Cartoon Network shows, what better way to continue the trend than jumping from the Hero Adventure Time to its sister show, Steven Universe. Now, Steven Universe is a weird show. It's like a roller coaster. For all its substantial highs, there were some substantial lows. But one place the show never failed was with its characters. Mostly, but that's another video for another day. But when it came to the core characters of the show, you can tell that the writers put in the effort to define them as well as they could. But none of them were as defined as its titular character, Steven Universe. And like Finn, Steven is a bit of an oddity. Whereas Finn's journey was all about trying to grow up in a weird world and develop as a person, Steven's journey is one of self-discovery and learning to step out of the shadows set before you. And while there is a lot to talk about with that, it's not going to be the primary focus of this video. Don't worry, I will be talking about that a lot here, but I want to step away from the gem side of Steven and focus more on the human side. More importantly, how the way Steven was raised ended up influencing the plot of both the show and the overall theme of Future. So, let's do that. Breaking down the needs of Steven in his childhood, how the gems couldn't give him that, how the entire war of Homeworld influenced him, and most importantly, how lacking those basic structures led to a decent chunk of the overarching theme in Future. And as always, if you enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more content. But without any further ado, we can begin. So let's raise the curtain, put this character on stage, and see what he has to say. Alright, so before we kick things off, we have to acknowledge two very important things about Steven. The first is that when the series started and up until the end of season 1, he was 10 years old. And while that may seem like an obvious and minute detail, it's going to make sense the more we go into this video. And the second thing is that despite their love for him, the truth is that Steven was raised by the equivalent of a homeless man and 3 alien war veteran hermits. To keep it short, this was not a healthy way for a boy to live. Now, let me make something very clear. Both Greg and the Gems love Steven with all the love they could ever have. It's just when it came to the video of raising him, both parties were out of their depth. Which leads to one of the main points of the video, which is the fact that Steven from a very young age had no real form of conformity. Now, bear with me because I know how that sounds. The word conformity has a rather negative association with it. But the thing is that for younger kids, conformity is virtually a necessity for development. It helps to normalize the things that happen in our lives, and yet Steven doesn't have any of that. And yes, while most people would say that Petey and Connie were his friends, and to their credit they were, but when you look at how he interacts with them, you notice that Steven doesn't have any real social skills or any social net to vent his feelings. It's something you'll notice when you look over a lot of the earlier seasons, and it becomes far more prominent as the show goes on. Even from the very beginning when he first met Connie, it was pretty apparent that Steven had very infrequent interactions with people his own age. And in the case of Petey, he had someone to talk to, but it always felt like it was more of a matter of convenience than a genuine friendship. But by now you're wondering, what does all of this have to do with Steven's character arc? Well, the truth is that like Finn, Steven had 3 defining moments to his arc, and in each one he tried his best to normalize his life and try to find some semblance of conformity in it, which became increasingly more complicated because he didn't have anyone who could genuinely relate to what he was going through. So essentially each phase he went through was his way of coping. First was the human phase, then the gem phase, and third and most importantly, the future or normal phase. See, each of these phases represents how Steven tried to normalize his life over the course of the show from the people who raised him. The first phase of the show that we see is the human phase, and you'll notice it's really more just being Greg. This phase of Steven is him trying to normalize his life by ignoring how weird it is. This is him just trying to pretend that everything that happens to him is sort of just par for the course. You'll notice a lot of it in the way he talks in the earlier seasons. When someone points out how weird the gems look and act, Steven chalks it as just the gems are weird or that Beach City itself is weird. It's a lot like how Greg acts about gem stuff. When he was younger, he just went with the flow of Rose and the gems, and when he got older and had Steven, he just accepted that Steven was going to have to go through those same things. And here, Steven is just copying that same behavior. In a lot of the earlier episodes in most of season 1, you really see that attitude towards any gem related stuff. He knows it's weird and off-putting, but he also plays it off as something that just happens in his life. And you'll notice the common thing with these phases is that they work for a while, and in the case of the human phase, it did work for a majority of the first and second season, but eventually something forces Steven to face reality. At the end of season 1, it was Jasper, and in a bigger picture, the entirety of Homeworld and its issues, because this was a first for Steven. Until Jasper, and to a similar extent Lapis, all the gems that Steven had ever fought had never been capable of real communication. They were mindless monsters that you just had to beat up. But here were two gems that were A, sentient, and B, a direct connection to his mother, and were either tortured because they were assumed fighters for the rebellion, or actually fought in the war and hated her because of it. And it's their existence and everything that follows that ends that human phase. Because now Steven can't just ignore these problems anymore. These weren't monsters that had to be taken down, these were gems that had experienced firsthand the sufferings of the war and met his mother. So this was something that Steven couldn't just pretend was normal. And the 2 episodes right after this pretty much confirm it. Joyride shows how people with actual normal lives react to what he does, and how shocked they are that a kid handles it at all. But full disclosure is where you start to see Steven slip from the human phase and into the gem phase. It even confirms it with the speech Ronaldo gives him.
Oh, but it's a good reminder. This is no easy path we've chosen here. There are sacrifices. Look at them all down there, Steven. It's our duty to let those simple people live out their simple lives without ever knowing the burden of being friends with us.
That no one can really understand the danger that they go through, and that he'll spend most of his time alone and fighting. So now instead of trying to pretend what he does is normal, he decides to train and face it head on, because now he has to fight even if he doesn't want to. And like the human phase, this works. It allows Steven to normalize his life by seeing it as a fight for good and evil. He jumps right back into a mindset that can make sense of what he's going through, and like the human phase, it works for a while because the few homeworld gems he meets are honestly evil. But like that phase, this one also hits an issue with the appearance of Bismuth. And for people wondering when I was going to start talking about the PTSD issues, now. I'm going to start now. Because both Bismuth, the episode, and the character are one of, if not the most defining moments for both the series and what I'm talking about right now. See, with every phase Steven has gone through so far, there was the option of ignoring or normalizing who was doing as part of the greater good. But here you had Bismuth, a good gem with bad intentions who was showing Steven that his life couldn't be as simple or as black and white as he wanted. And that theme permeates this phase. Steven trying to make sense of his life as he gets older, or trying to find some way to justify his life being the way it is, only for him to come to the realization that it's almost impossible to justify, and that his mother wasn't the ideal person he thought she was. And it's those two moments that push him into the final phase, or the future/normal phase. So for anyone that was wondering when I was going to get to this, well, here we go. Also, I feel it's important to mention that at this point Steven is just now turning 16. Just keep that in mind with everything I've said so far. Alright, so obviously the core theme of Future is about Steven learning and embracing his PTSD and trauma. It's a not at all subtle topic the show talks about, but what isn't focused on so much is how hard Steven tries to force his life to be normal. Nearly every episode in Future is dedicated in some way towards Steven trying to live a normal life, and in turn escape the events of his life and the disaster of a legacy his mother left him. In fact, one of the most major scenes in Future is Steven trying to break the cycle that led to him. That being the proposal to Connie. And while a lot of people have a lot to say about this, and yes, the scene is awkward and clunky, that's what it's meant to be. This is a point where Steven is so beaten down by everything that's happened to him at this point that he's desperate to escape it. He doesn't want to think about the mess his mom left him or the trauma he's had to endure or is still enduring. Those were things out of his control. But this moment right here was him trying to create something normal that he could hold on to amidst everything he had to endure. And what happens when it doesn't work? He starts to spiral deeper and deeper into his own trauma and his own resentment of his life. Every episode after this moment is him lashing out and trying to get rid of the people that put all this pressure and trauma on him. He fights and nearly kills Jasper, tries to shatter White, and lashes out at the Gems and Greg. These are all people who throughout his life actively changed it for the worse. It's why the finale of Future works as well as it does. It's as much about Steven suffering from his mother's past as it is him suffering from his own and striving to move past it and find something normal. In fact, in the very first part of Future, we hear Steven sing about this exact idea.
Once upon a time I thought I'd always be in my mother's shadow, answering for her crimes. I thought I'd always be in an endless battle.
This song's entire course is talking about the story of Steven's life. A boy who was told he had to live up to a legacy that honestly never really existed outside of what the people under her were told to believe. He's a child bound by her mistakes and forced to spend the majority of his childhood learning that he has to atone for them while also being trained to take her place. Even the full version of the opening theme song addresses this.
I will fight to be everything that everybody wants me to be when I'm grown.
He's not fighting for the Earth or his family, he's fighting because he believes that's what everyone expects him to do. Because he's Pink Diamond and Rose Quartz, and it's what they would have done. And every phase I've described was him trying to live up to that legacy, failing and having no real way of communicating how that was starting to destroy him from the inside out. He had no real confidant in his life that could understand the pressure, His father tried his best to ignore the gem half of his son, and the gems never really understood humanity, so they never caught on to the issue. It's why the finale of Future is the way it is. It's Steven finally realizing that as much as he loves the gems and Beach City, he can't stay there because it's not healthy for him. So instead, he sets off, forging his own path and finding his life. No more trying to live up to a legacy, no more trying to honor the woman he thought his mother was, just him leaving behind a life of misery to try and salvage what he can for his future. He may have to leave the gems behind, but now it means he can actually have a future that's his to decide. And with that, we come to the conclusion on the character study on Steven Universe. I know this took a long time to get out, but in my defense, this show is convoluted as all hell, and trying to pick apart everything I could to write this took way more time than I thought, and I'm still 99% sure I missed something. But as always, with the current closing, I'll leave you with some questions. What do you think is one of Steven's more defining moments in the show, and do you think the show did a good job of conveying its themes? Leave a comment down below letting me know what you think, and as always, if you enjoyed the content, be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, I've been your host Alexander, and I hope to see you back in my theater.